This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, this is Freddie Cohen of ESPN Radio. When I'm not talking about breaking news or breaking news on ESPN Radio, I'm always a fan and listen to the Detroit Sports Podcast, and so should you.
Episode 166 is now available for download on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, my cousin, Adam the Jock Strozinski. What's up, cuz?
Fresh off whipping your ace in some fantasy football. I like how we split this season. That's good. I needed that because now I reclaim our division, which I think we have probably the toughest division. We've got between the three people in the division, we've got probably the most wins. Other divisions have somebody who's 4-1, 4-1, and then they have like 1-4, and then another division has somebody who's like 5-0, and then 1-4, and then 0-5. So I think we've got the toughest division. It's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to come down to probably week 13 in fantasy football to see who gets in, and I'm assuming one of us will be a wild card. Whether it be you, me, or your wife there. So it's going to be interesting.
I have an issue with the strategy of going with light running backs, is that the guys I did choose to have on my team are all getting hurt week by week.
That was my season last year.
I cannot believe literally that I started Amir Abdullah, he gets hurt. Now I'm rolling into the problem where some of the guys that I need to perform are on buys. So I'm getting through that. Starting off the year great with the lineup that I had, like the Tigers. I dropped 120 points every week. Now when you sprinkle in injuries, I'm finding I have a major weakness in dealing with that on my fantasy team. So starting off strong in a lot of leagues, winning the first two games, scoring a lot of points, then the injury bug has decimated a lot of my teams, and I'm on 3-game losing streaks in a couple leagues. And it's very interesting to note how bad injuries can affect your team, and then you have to adjust and adapt. And really, that's where the weakness comes. I just don't have time to evaluate other guys. Like, I don't even know who the guys I'm picking up. I'm just going by projections, and those guys aren't performing. Literally, when I'm getting killed by running backs, combined scoring of like 30 points with what you had, and my guys are getting 1 and 0. It's a nightmare. But yeah, I got to win against you. You got the win last week, but what the hell, man?
So you need a running back.
I need a running back. I need multiple running backs.
So I've got some running backs.
Yeah.
You've got a tight end that I wouldn't mind procuring.
Oh, yeah, you want Rob Gronkowski?
I'm just saying.
Throw a trade out there.
You need some running backs, so I think I might have something else in the hopper. If I have something else in the hopper, I think I will be able to give you a running back or two if you're willing to throw Gronk Daddy in the mix.
That's not a bad idea. Throw me a trade option, sir. I think I'll take it.
We'll do this off air. We'll talk about it.
You know, before we get started talking about the Lions, Michigan State, Michigan, the other news and notes going on around Detroit sports, everything going good with you, sir?
Yeah, I can't complain.
Good.
Life is moving along, as they say. So not too bad. How about yourself? Everything's good?
Yeah, everything's good. I can't complain.
This is like my second time I get to see you this week. Back-to-back days here, you know? You're looking good.
Yeah, the network's done very well. I'm very happy with how things have progressed this year. Now it's time to start looking at what we're going to do for 2017 because 2016 was very good, and we'll just got to keep it moving. And that's what I'm excited to do is, catch up with you on Wednesdays, do a podcast recording. And I'm very curious, though, in that, when you listen to the radio stations around town and you look at maybe the vibe of the fans, I'm very curious that a lot of people have really taken the stance that, and I'll ask you if you believe that maybe getting a win versus Philly was maybe not in the best interest of the Lions. And I kind of think that like maybe 2%, like, well, if they had lost, then, maybe Jim Caldwell will be out faster. But I'm excited for the win. Now, it was booze assisted. I definitely was a little bit loose on Sunday. It made it for a fun time watching the Lions. The edge was off. But after the game, I'm really surprised that a lot of fans have taken the attitude of, we should have lost that game in order to facilitate Jim Caldwell leaving. I'm kind of thinking that it's kind of inevitable. I don't think Bob Quinn can really wrap his mind and really do a full evaluation and go, this is my guy. But I'm really surprised. Were you okay that the Lions won the game?
Look, as this Lions game unfolded, emotionally, I was upset. And I wasn't upset that they were sitting there almost losing this game. I was upset because they were winning this game. They jumped out to a 3-touchdown lead, and I was like, what the heck's going on here? This is not how it's supposed to be. This game is so same old Lions. You roll into the season, you get a win against the Indianapolis Colts on the road. All right, you then turn around and you have a very winnable game against Tennessee. You blow that. That was a game that we all penciled in as a W. You then go on the road to a Chicago team that is absolute hot garbage. Hot garbage. And you blow that game, and you look awful. The only reason you get a touchdown is due to special teams. That's how bad Matt Stafford and that offense was. You then turn around against an undefeated Eagles team, a team that you're supposed to lose to. And you sit there and you come out like gangbusters. And before you know it, they've got 3 touchdowns on the board. Everything's rocking and rolling. They go in at the half. They've got a big lead. They come out in the third quarter, and they look more like the Lions that we're used to. And I'm like, all right, cool. They're going to sit there. They're going to blow this. That's great. It's going to expedite the entire situation. And possibly Jim Caldwell will be gone before we head into next week. No. You end up winning the game. You get a field goal, and you win by 1. Darius Slay makes 2 huge plays to sit there and cap off the game and seal the victory for you. Emotionally, I was like, what the heck is going on? I wanted them to lose this game so bad.
The people of this country are furious.
That's right. That's right, Donald. I was furious. You were furious. Everyone was furious. I wanted the Lions to lose. I needed them to lose because this is just back to what it's been for 15, 20, 50 years? It's just same old Lions. You sit there and you're going to end up dropping games to teams that you should beat, and you're going to come out and you're going to beat teams that you should lose to. It makes no sense, and it just continues the cycle that we've been in for years.
And I think I'm getting a sense of where fans are at in that they've watched a lack of success for so many years that now the majority of people, you, Jason, a lot of fans are thinking globally. And they're thinking, okay, once you let go of Mayhew coming off that disastrous Matt Millen era going into Martin Mayhew, a lot of people are thinking, and I think that's right, how they're thinking is that they're going, how is this team looking in terms of going to the Super Bowl? How are they looking compared to other championship level clubs? And when you look at it like that, globally, big picture wise, I can see where people are frustrated. But in my thinking, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be frustrated all the time. I've been thinking that way for years upon years. And so, like we said, we were going to go game by game. And if you look globally, and I think that's where everyone is kind of at right now with this Lions club. If you look big picture, yeah, it doesn't look like Jim Caldwell is going to lead this team to the promised land. But if you just look at game by game, you go, okay, versus Chicago, it was a disastrous performance. That could have lingered. That could have been something that carried on for a stretch of games. But they quickly solved that problem. They arrived. They played as best as they could versus the Eagles. Now, there are some things they definitely got to clean up on the offensive side, and whatever they're doing at halftime needs to be thrown out. And this lack of adjustment is probably going to be Jim Caldwell's downfall because that's just a big pattern. It's not getting any better. But if you just look at it game by game, I'm happy that he showed a little bit of emotion. He was into the game. The game plan looked effective early on. And so he had his team prepared in the best way possible, given the fact he's a little bit, and the Lions organization right now is a little bit limited with a lot of injuries. So in that sense, if you just look at last week's performance, it was good enough to win. That has been a game where you also could have lost in the past. So we're sitting here at 2-3. If you have this team going 7-9, 8-8, you're going to have to pick up 7 or 8 wins somewhere. So my emotional reaction to that was, you know what? Get the win. I'm happy. You definitely have to improve on a lot of different areas in order to go forward. And you got to also remember, the Lions may be at a certain level, but again, we talked about it. The rest of the league is not killer. There's only a handful of teams that you know going into the game that even if you probably do your best, they're going to thump you anyway. Dude, versus the Rams, the Redskins, if you put on a decent performance, you're in the game, and that's what I expect them to be in the game the rest of, for the next foreseeable future. They're going to be in games. So
do you feel like this was a statement win for this team then?
Oh, no, hell no.
This is a 4-0 team that had everything going for itself.
No, hell no.
They were 3-0.
Yeah, they were undefeated. The Eagles were undefeated, and it was, Carson Wentz mania took off.
They were 3-0. I'm sorry. Yeah, 3-0, not 4-0.
A lot of people,
they were undefeated.
Yeah.
They had everything going for them. Carson Wentz was the toast of the town, and he does look like he's going to be a very good quarterback. I believe in my heart of hearts, he's going to be a very good quarterback. If you look at what he's got around him, I don't necessarily like that offensive line.
Yeah.
His most offensive threat of a weapon is Ryan Matthews, and he had a huge costly fumble. That defense, if that defense was worth a damn, they would have stood up and they would have sat there and helped this team get a victory. Instead, Detroit's able to sit there, go down the field, and kick a field goal. So I like what this team is, and it has a lot going for itself. But that being said, like you said, I don't believe this is a statement win. Hell no. I think what it does is it prolongs Jim Caldwell's tenure here. It kind of puts everything off, puts it on the back burner for a little bit, takes some of that heat off. They basically dialed it down instead of it being on an 8 or 9. And if they would have lost, it probably would have been amped up to a 9.5. They turned it down to maybe about a 6. Because now he's going to take on an LA Rams team that has looked better since week 1. But again, I don't know what this LA Rams team is. They don't have a very good quarterback with Case Keenum. Todd Gurley's a good player. But other than that, what else are you looking at here? I mean, receiver-wise, it's Kenny Britt and nothing else. So I don't think this team has a lot of weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they do have some playmakers, but I just don't think there's enough there. So now if they take on this LA Rams team and they lose this game, I think now you turn the dial back up and you're somewhere near that 9.5 for Jim Caldwell to get fired.
Here's how I'm looking at it. And now, to get to my point real quickly, before you talked about the Rams, a lot of people asked us about the gambling angle this week on Twitter. They wanted to know because the line was set, the Eagles were favored by 4, and I had a feeling that the Lions were going to lose close. So I just said that I felt like, I didn't say it specifically and hammer the point, but I would have said gambling-wise, take the Lions and the points. No doubt about it.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it. At home, I would have even come close to saying the Lions were going to win it. But Jim Caldwell has done some things, and at this time, there's always that saying, the perfect fit at the right time. And Jim Caldwell's coming into the organization at a right time when Martha Ford lost her husband. She's seeking a stabilizing force. She obviously understands that, there's been a lot of coaches that have come in. They haven't done well. So she's looking for a little bit of stabilization. And I do believe that they're willing to take and maybe accept 6-7 wins this year and keep Jim Caldwell for next year, because there is a thinking in organizations that stability and continuity can help your ball club. And I do believe that Jim Caldwell is the right guy for that organization in their eyes. They believe that he's a stabilizing force. They love his persona. He's a little bit older. He has kind of righted the ship a little bit in terms of, you remember when they had the rash of the offseason with Jim Schwartz, where everyone's getting busted for weed. You had problems with, arrests.
And they're eating potpourri.
Exactly. So you had the gangster mentality going on, and they were like, we don't like that. That's probably more, the reason why Jim Schwartz is gone.
He's cleaned up the locker room.
He's cleaned up the locker room,
and
they like
his job of that.
And I really believe they like the fact that he's the guy that's taking the bullets. He's the buffer between the media and the ownership. He's the one standing up there, game in, game out, and, just giving the PC answers, and he's not rattled, and he's giving it back. You got to remember, too, the Ford family is berated every single week. Sell the team, sell the team. A lot of people don't like the Ford family owning the Lions, and he's up there not only taking the questions, he's giving the company line, and he is firing back and going, listen, I know you guys want this info. I'm only going to give you this. You ask me, my reaction to being excited. I'm excited. Everyone's looking at him like, oh, okay. He's willing to stand up there and probably lie right to the media's face. He's willing to do it. And I think the Fords like that. They like the way he answers. They like the way he represents the organization. Now, that's not my belief.
Some of the salty and crotchetiness that he displays.
They
up
like
there.
that, yes. And so I believe, unless I would say probably the marker is 5 to 6 wins. If he doesn't get that, that's going to be hard to sell to your fans. But if you get 7, 8, 9 wins, just judging by what the tone from what I'm observing, Caldwell's coming back. So the talk about firing Caldwell, unless the performances are god-awful, you get one more performance like that versus Chicago where you don't look ready, unmotivated, unpassionate, then there's reason to believe. So I'm going to ask you, are you rooting for the Lions to look like how they looked versus the Bears going forward for the next couple games?
Every single game. Every single game.
That's what you're rooting for?
Without a question. I want them to look pathetic.
I'm not.
I want them to look awful. I want Bob Quinn to sit there and revamp this entire thing. I feel like he started this season out kind of half-assing it because he either had to keep Jim Caldwell or there was no better option for him to get at this time. I think he's got a list. I think he knows who he wants as his head coach. And what I need them to do is now go out and look atrocious. Look just absolutely like hot, flaming garbage. Just cans of waste set ablaze. That's what I need. I need them to be brutal all the way through the rest of the season. I need to get some draft picks, some high-end draft picks, be able to procure some talent, get some guys in here to really help filter this thing out and kind of balance it out. That's the big issue with this team. There's really no depth, especially at linebacker. You got a guy like DeAndre Levy who's still out, and he's talking about, he ends up having a meeting with ESPN, an interview, and in his interview, he says he hopes to be back by the end of the season. What do you mean you hope to be back by the end of the season? If you hope to be back, shouldn't you at least be on IR? Because they haven't IR'd you, so now they're just taking up a roster spot. What's going on here? And this now falls back to Jim Caldwell. It's a circular cookie here, man. It all goes right back to Jim Caldwell because Jim Caldwell won't answer a question on what's going on with DeAndre Levy. Nobody knows. So now in the media, we're forced to speculate. Does he have a torn quad? Does he have a blown out knee? Does he have a strained knee ligament? Does he not want to play? Does he still want to play? He hopes to be back sometime this season. What does that mean? Does that mean week 16, week 17, you're showing back up and putting the pads on when the season's all but over? Because I don't see them making the playoffs. I really don't. Because you're not better than Minnesota, who at this time is the last undefeated team in the league. You're not better than Green Bay. So unless we're getting two teams from our division into the playoffs, which, come on, that's a real difficult thing to do. And I just don't think that the NFC is going to allow that to happen. I think there are too many other good teams in the NFC that will have a say in this. So I just don't see you making the playoffs.
See, I disagree completely with that notion. The problem with wanting your team to win, wanting your team to lose all the time is a team like the Eagles is not significantly better than you. Across the board, the NFL is set up where teams are mediocre. There's only a handful of teams that are elite year in and year out, and that's been set up through great management and great drafting.
But I'm not saying the Eagles are elite. I'm just saying that right now, as it stands, the Eagles are basically 3-1, all right, and they've got their entire season ahead of them still, and they look like they're on the right track. Detroit is 2-3 at this point, and they've had brutal losses. Absolutely brutal losses.
And what I'm telling you is that a team like the Bears was trying to hand you a victory, and you couldn't do it.
And you still couldn't do it, so I don't think you're a good enough team. That's my point.
But the Eagles had a victory in hand. Ryan Matthews fumbles the ball, they make mistakes. Or, like we said, most games are very close. The Eagles had the ball late. They had what they needed to do. And stupidly, with the rookie quarterback, you take the home run threat. That was a bad decision. You probably if you don't make that decision, if Carson Wentz just dinks and dunks it, I believe they go down and they easily win that game.
And I agree. And that being said, that's more to my point. This team is not good enough to win games. They're not going to win a Super Bowl this year. They're not going to make the playoffs. So why are you going to win games? Why? What's the point? If you win games, you just get more mid-round draft picks when you can get some elite talent up at the top of the draft board if Bob Quinn knows what he's doing.
That's what I'm saying.
And it looks like he might know what he's doing because we've got a late-round draft pick in Washington who looks like he's a good running back, looks like he might be the future for this team if he can stay healthy. And some of the draft picks that he has made, they look like they'll pan out and they will be good going forward. Now, again, they look, and there's that scary word, potential. They look like they have a lot of potential, and they look like they're tracking in the right direction. That being said, there's still not enough depth on this team, and they're still not a very good team. So why do you want them to win? I don't understand. They're not in a spot where they should be contending for anything because they're not going to contend for anything.
I think what you need to do is start asking yourself why certain moves are made, and also ask yourself why Bob Quinn is doing what he's doing. So let's say, for example, the narrative is that Martha Ford says, hey, we like this guy. Okay, Bob Quinn knows that. He gets the job. He goes and he says, listen, I'm going to follow along with what you said, but naturally probably, Coach Caldwell isn't in line exactly with what I'm thinking, but I'm going to, do you a solid. I'm going to keep the guy that you want. Now, he has a free year.
Exactly.
He's got a free year to evaluate everything, and he can sit back and he can watch and see what's going on around the league, which players this team needs. He can evaluate the depth, the franchise, all the players. He can make his decisions. And then at the end of the year, he can go, you know what? I gave you the year. I don't think this is where I need to go. And he can make a legitimate case that, hey, I need to go in the direction I need to go. So he's buying himself time. And he might just say, you know what? If he can get this team to the playoffs, he can even make it easier for me. Then I don't have to fire him right away. And it's a good look for me in my first year to get to the postseason. It helps Bob Quinn out tremendously to stay in favor with the Fords and to have victory, because this year for him, in terms of what most people are thinking, it's a free pass. He can do no wrong.
And I totally agree with you. I think this year is a free pass.
But you don't want him to. I don't think you should root for this team to lose. You should root for this team to win.
No, I see the way I look at it totally different. I think if you're rooting for them to lose and you want them to lose, what that then does is it gives you a better crop to pick from come draft day, okay? You can get more high-end talent for this team. If anything, you know that depth is an issue on this team. If you get a top 5 pick, right, because you finish somewhere in the bottom third of the league or so, you get a top 5 pick. You can then spin that top 5 pick off into 3 or 4 other draft picks that can help this team. If there's a good crop of quarterbacks that are going to come out, teams like Cleveland are going to want a quarterback. Teams like possibly San Francisco, because it sounds like Colin Kaepernick is going to restructure his deal so he can get out early. So there are teams that are going to be looking for quarterbacks, and generally quarterbacks, as we know, go in the top 5 picks. So you get a top 5 pick, you can spin that off just like Cleveland did last year. Cleveland sat there and they totally passed on Carson Wentz. They just said, okay, no, we're good. You know what? We're going to take the draft picks. And they went and they had just a bushel bag of draft picks that they sat there and they helped add some pieces to this team. Now, Cleveland's probably a bad example because they're 0-5 and they can't get out of their own way, but they've gone through like 4 quarterbacks already this season and they're only 5 games in. So it's just atrocious there right now. Matt Stafford's going to be your quarterback of the future. This team is going to bring Matt Stafford back. They're going to make him the highest paid quarterback. So wrap your brain around that. All right, you need more depth on this team. You don't need a quarterback. You need more depth. We and you both have talked about it. We want a different quarterback. We'd love them to go out and sit there and get somebody to push Matt Stafford. We were hoping Jake Rudock would be that guy. And it ain't going to happen because you got Dan Orlovsky as your number 2. Jake Rudock's on the practice squad. Him and a jugs machine. They're just sitting there throwing balls. That's all there is to it.
Well, okay, so we agree to disagree. My final point on that would be, listen, losing causes a lot of bad morale. And if you continue to lose, you don't know the tipping point for Matthew Stafford where he doesn't even want to come back. He might just say, I want out.
I think he's frustrated as hell right now.
He has to
You
be.
see him when he's sitting there F-bombing guys up and down the sideline, and he's sitting there screaming at his offensive line because they're not very good right now. And we'll talk about Laken Tomlinson getting benched because he's a total bust, and I hated that draft pick when they made it. He's not happy right now at all. I'm more afraid that he's going to have David Carr syndrome here very shortly, where he's just going to be waking up in the middle of the night with cold sweats because he's fearing that he's got defensive ends and defensive tackles just surrounding him and crushing him. I mean, he had his damn head ripped off this week. It was unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And you got a guy like Laken Tomlinson sitting there getting benched, and then Jim Caldwell has the audacity to come out and say, no, he wasn't benched. Okay, guy. Like, you didn't play him for the second half. Like, what are you talking about? Laken Tomlinson, that was a bad pick. I'm going to be honest with you. I hated that pick the moment they made it. I have no idea why you went to the ACC to get to sit there and take a first-round guard. You don't ever draft an offensive lineman in the first round who's going to be a guard. If you want, you get a tackle, whether it be a left or a right tackle. And generally, in the top 15 to 18 picks, that thing better be a left tackle. And later on in the draft, it can be a right tackle. That's okay. I'm perplexed why that draft pick was made. I hated it the moment that it came across my TV screen. I wanted to throw a shoe through my TV. It's a good thing I love my TV because honestly, it would be, I hate that pick. I think he's atrocious. I don't think he's very good. I don't know. You got Jim Caldwell basically coming out and saying, hey, this is how offensive linemen, they develop. They develop slowly. Yeah, no crap. I understand that. I get it. They do develop slowly, but he looks bad. He looks real bad. There looks like there's been a lot of regression. He hasn't been able to get out of his own way since the preseason, since OTAs. He looked atrocious in OTAs. You have guys like Dave Burkett coming out, Justin Rogers coming out, and back in the day when Josh Katzenstein was working for the news, he just looked atrocious. They would basically come out and say it in so many words. He looks bad. And then he's sitting there starting fights and scuffs in the middle of practice because he's getting beat so bad. He is brutal. Absolutely brutal.
But with that said, okay.
Another blown pick.
You notice that they made a move and they brought in Glasgow and he did some things. And so that's what you're looking for in an organization where you go, okay, that was the final Mayhew draft, but now he's gone. So Martin Mayhew's gone, and now it's Bob Quinn's job to constantly scour the waiver wires, look for talent, and he drafted Glasgow. And if Laken can't do the job, next man up. And they weren't just going to sit with him. And Glasgow came in and did some things. But yeah, so, in terms of the Lions and Laken Tomlinson, yeah, they have to really look at his progression and go, whoa, if that's not the case, if he can't get out there and help Matthew Stafford and help that running game, then there's no chance a guy like Forsett, who they just added, is going to have any success. You got to remember that the goal should be to improve the running game and to have a balance and to keep Matthew Stafford upright. And if they're not doing the job, if a guy like Laken is not doing the job, then he's got to ride the bench. Exactly what they did. Listen, with Caldwell, I think to save your blood pressure, just don't worry what he says, because what he's saying is just a shield. It's lies. It's not. He is, lying to the media.
But he's so obstinate and so cocky and arrogant about it. It's just it's irritating. It gets underneath my skin, underneath my fingernails, and I just want to rip them off.
But if they win, do you care then? Because now all it is, then all you say,
yeah, I do care because I don't want them here. I want them to lose.
But I believe that's
we just talked about that for 20 minutes.
Listen, Bob Quinn, New England. The next coach is going to talk the same way. You're not with the Lions organization. They've actually, the more pushback the media gets, the more obstinate they get. That's what I kind of respect that. Like, listen, this is our stance. If you like it, great. If you berate us, hey, that's great too. We're just going to go about our business. I kind of like that. They're taking the stance.
Here's the thing. He has no right to be that way. Look, if you want to do it like New England does, right? You want to do it like Bill Belichick
What if he's being told, do it like this? What if
I don't know.
What if Bob Quinn?
It's all conjecture.
Yeah, but Bob Quinn could be like, listen, keep it like this. And he's like, oh, this is perfect. This is another reason why we're in line. I'm going to keep it private.
But he was like this last year. He wasn't like this. This is the way Jim Caldwell is. He was like this last year and the year before that. It's how he is. He doesn't handle losing well. And that's fine. I understand that. I don't handle losing well. I'm on an 0-3 soccer team. We suck. We do. We get our butts handed to us every week. And every week I sit there and I go off on everybody on my team, including my wife. It's brutal. All right? So I don't handle losing well. So I understand that. I get it. I do. I really do. But you know what? You're the head coach. You're not supposed to be obstinate like this. And if you are going to be obstinate like this, you should at least have some reason why you are. Bill Belichick has earned it. Bill Belichick went 3-1 with his second-string quarterback and his third-string quarterback, and then his third-string quarterback being hurt. So I don't want to hear about it. I don't, because he was able to sit there and pull off victories with quarterbacks that were held together with duct tape and super glue. I mean, that's a hell of a coach right there.
Okay.
So, look, he has every right to be as angry and as fickle as he wants to be when he's up there. Jim Caldwell has no right. Jim Caldwell did not win a Super Bowl. Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl. That's who won that Super Bowl. All right, let's be honest. And Peyton Manning, I think, in a private moment, will tell you, Jim Caldwell's a boob. He is a boob. He has no... Who wears 2 watches? Best text message ever, right? I'm going to read this to you, okay? I got this from my cousin on Sunday because he
discovered that he wears 2 watches.
He loves Lions football. No, he took a screenshot of his television, right? And it's Jim Caldwell showing some emotion, and he's got both his watches up. And it says 21-10, so they're going in at halftime. It's the halftime picture of Jim Caldwell. He's like, in real life, when you see someone wearing 2 watches, you get them a helmet. Us, we make them our head football coach. And he's like, neither one of them are digital, so he probably doesn't know what the hell they say anyways. Greatest text message ever. Joey, you're the truth, bro. So I would say that just goes to my point. I mean, the guy can't get 11 dudes on the field, right? Why is he wearing 2 watches? Because he doesn't use timeouts well, and he can't tell time. It's absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd. He has to go. That's why this team needs to lose. And look, like you said, I think there's a cutoff. I think maybe at 7-8 wins, it makes Bob Quinn, his job, that much harder. He either has to say, yes, he can stay, or no, he can go. But anything less than 7 or 8 wins, it seems like it's a clear and cut. You're out the door. Here's the door. Here's my boot. Up your behind. Go.
The addition of the week, obviously, Dwayne Washington's injury has affected the team. You saw that Theo Riddick can do some things in the passing game. Probably more and more you see it. Without a solid offensive line, it's going to be hard for him to consistently get the yards. And so they feel like naturally his role is better suited to be, the secondary guy. And that's just the way it is. So they went out and they got Justin Forsett, a guy formerly from the Ravens. And,
familiarity with Jim Caldwell.
Exactly.
That was his offensive coordinator at one time.
Okay, so what are your thoughts about his addition? Is he going to do some things? Is he going to be the guy that's a stopgap for this year and to be able to maybe, take over for Amir Abdullah and do some things? Help this run game? Now, with this line, I don't know.
All right, here's the deal. He's a totally different back than what Amir Abdullah is, okay? Amir Abdullah is a little bit more flashy, can kind of run between the tackles, this, that, the other thing. Justin Forsett is a bruiser. He's a between the tackles kind of guy. He's got some speed. He's waning from where he used to be extremely productive. So I think them taking a flyer on him, picking him up, and adding them to the roster, I think give him a week or two. I think this is going to be a very good signing. I think it's going to help this team because you're absolutely right. This team loves to throw the football, and that is great. But what it does is when you go in at halftime, like you were saying, halftime adjustments, you go in at halftime, the other team can sit there and they know what you're going to do because you don't have a run game. So I think now Justin Forsett, that signing helps kind of level that out a little bit. Look, I expect this team to still be very pass happy, but I think that now they're going to be able to run the ball a little bit more. Theo Riddick is not an every down back, and I think the more and more he runs and the more and more he's out there, he's exposed for what he truly is. He needs to sit there and be used sporadically. He needs to be the second option in your run game. I think Justin Forsett, give him a week to kind of get caught up on what's going on, and they sit there and they kind of tailor the playbook to him a little bit for certain run plays. I think it'll prove beneficial for this team because it's going to force teams to be a little bit more honest. And I think that helps this team do what you want them to do, get W's.
You've seen now the way the Lions have played the last couple of weeks. You've seen that if Golden Tate is involved in that offense and Marvin Jones is consistent, if Stafford can be on point, the offense has the opportunity more games than not to gain that consistency. They just got to work on that run game, and Forsett can be that addition. But on the defensive end, you really got to kind of look at, okay, now you see a formula that can have success, is that if you can get a little bit of pressure from anybody on that line can make up for Ziggy Ansah. If you can get a couple more turnovers from Darius Slay and the guys in the crew, you have a decent chance. The problem I'm seeing is that when Carson Wentz was able to just stand there and pick apart your defense, it's, you've seen that he had some effectiveness there. So it's really hard when your best defensive end is down and it doesn't look like he's going to be back by the Rams game. So this Lions team, you could sense that if the big play guys can consistently step up, why is it that it took the Game 5 for Darius Slay to be this impact guy? This is what they're paying him the big bucks for. Cause fumbles, cause chaos. And so you go to yourself, you go, okay, Terrell Austin, you got to put this defense in a much better spot to get pressure and to do some things, because if Case Keenum comes to Detroit and does some things, a lot of people are worried that Todd Gurley is going to go for 150 and 3 touchdowns. And they did a little bit of job. They did a little better job versus the tight ends versus Philly, and so that defense is making some minor adjustments. But everyone's wondering, do they have enough talent to get the job done? I think versus the Rams, if you can contain Gurley, the game plan on defense is simple: make Case Keenum beat you, and Slay should take on Tavon Austin, take him out of the game. You should be okay.
I think you're absolutely right. It's all about what this defensive front can do. You've seen it with the Eagles game. They were able to get some pressure on the quarterback. They forced some sacks, and they were able to force a few turnovers. That, in turn, makes their secondary look that much better, and you got a guy like Darius Slay being named Defensive Player of the Week here for the NFC. This is what you need to happen. That front has to be able to get pressure onto the quarterback and force them to turn the ball over. Look, Case Keenum's not a very good quarterback. I think we all know that. For some reason or another, again, Jeff Fisher finds himself in a situation where he has a owner telling him which quarterback he has to take. And he, by all accounts, Jeff Fisher didn't want Jared Goff at all. Didn't want Jared Goff. So now he's in a situation where he's got to play Case Keenum. Case Keenum is not a very good quarterback. So you get to him, you hit him in the mouth a couple times, you force him to throw the ball, you force him to throw into some coverage, and that's when your big playmakers, like a Darius Slay, can sit there and force a turnover. There is no doubt in my mind that this defense is laboring because you had 2 of your 3 big stars go out very early in the season. We were all counting on DeAndre Levy being back. We were all counting on Ziggy Ansah taking that next step in challenging a guy like J.J. Watt for the sack total this year. Both those guys go down. Now you've got Haloti Ngata dealing with a shoulder injury. So that puts a lot of pressure on a guy like a Darius Slay. And it's hard. It's hard for a defensive back to sit there and take on receivers because you can't touch them. The moment you touch them, it's a penalty. There's a flag. You can't sit there and you can't bump them. You can't do any. You can't even breathe on them because if you do, you're hurting your team. You have to lean on your front 7 to sit there and get pressure on that quarterback. If they're able to do that, I think this team can come away with a win and be victorious. I don't think the Rams are very good. Look, Todd Gurley is their best asset. If you can contain him, like you said, it's going to be a long day for the Rams.
Yep, I got them winning. I think that they get back to 500, and here's what I think is going to happen with the Lions. I just believe in any combination, they're just going to go 1-1 in the next 2 games. I think that this is the team that everyone thought they're probably going to be 7-9, 8-8. And so I do believe that whatever happens, they're able to, I think because of the schedule, really make up for poor play if they should go on and lose to the Rams. I think then they can come back and defeat the Redskins because the schedule is not that tough. So I really believe they can come back and do some things. And it's just a team, when you have injuries and you have not the best talent, then this is what you see, a little bit of up and down play. And I think probably by the bye week, we'll see a little bit more consistency. But there's a lot of good things, and I implore you to think more positively about these Detroit Lions. It might make you happier. And knowing that the organization loves them, some Jim Caldwell, you're just going to have to, probably the biggest A word that you have to learn is just accept it. That's just the way it is. If we were running the team, he would have been fired week 1. But we're not. So we just got to say, try the absolute best to put on a good performance and enjoy your $3.50 beer at the one location at Ford Field and enjoy the afternoon.
The Fords are such a joke. Look, I love living my life with my flamethrower, and I love blasting it at the Lions. This game is a game they should win. They should beat the Rams. They absolutely should. So because it's the same old Lions season, and that's what it's going to be, they're going to lose this game. Sit there and bet the house on the Rams. I don't care what the spread is. The Rams will end up winning this game because it's going to be a same old Lions season. They're going to be sitting there flying high after beating the Eagles, who came into Detroit undefeated. Rams are going to sit there and mosey on in, and they're going to sit there and pop the Lions. They'll finish 2-4 by the end of week 6.
Stay with us. Episode 166 is going to roll along. Doc's in session. A little bit of talk about the Red Wings. Stay with us on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I want to tell you about our newest sponsor, Team Top Cat Sales. Are you looking for team apparel for your high school, your club sports team, or corporation? Look no further than Top Cat Sales, located on the east side of Main Street in downtown Royal Oak, between 11 and 12 Mile. Through founder and former University of Michigan QB John Wangler's leadership, Top Cat Sales has developed a tradition of selling and distributing custom Adidas team apparel with the highest quality and best service. Get your organization, school, or club team all in with Adidas today by going to TopCatTeamSales.com. That's TopCatTeamSales.com. Also, follow Top Cat on Twitter at Team Top Cat.
This song gets me so hyped. This is John Cena's entrance.
I've got it taped twice on the DVR, just the entrance from SmackDown. AJ Styles is probably having one of the best years in wrestling of all time, and what a great addition. He's carrying the company. I don't like the fact they made him a heel, but he's doing some great things, and he's the WWE champion on SmackDown, and just any match that he's in, if you look up any AJ Styles match, you're going to have a good old time, enjoyable, because the dude can flat out wrestle. And
I love the fact that he's a heel. I think it's great. I think he's a little campy when he's on the mic. Some of the things he says, like, beat up John Cena. Like, I think that's stupid, but I love that he's a heel.
But that's the transition you got to make, and that you kind of just can't be the best wrestler. You got to have some of that entertaining value, a la Ric Flair, if you know what I mean. And you're right, actually.
Hey, that's a perfect segue, because this is another wonderful edition of Doc's in Session. This is where I bring some hard-hitting questions, and the Doc brings his baseball bat, and he refers to it as Lucille, and he sits there and hits these things out of the park.
Yes, sir, because I'm the man.
But to be the man, you gotta beat the man, and I'm saying, woo, right here, I'm the man. Woo! Bada boom, realest guys in the room, how you doing?
All right, Ric Flair incarnate here. No lies. MSU's been struggling. They've dropped 3 games straight. It's been a brutal stretch if you're a Spartan fan. That being said, is it now time for Tyler O'Connor to ride the pine? Because it looked like they changed some things up against BYU, and it looks like that offense kind of got a little bit going, but I think there were some other things that maybe were at play there. But is it now time for Mark D'Antonio to sit there and take a serious look at sitting his starting quarterback?
A lot of Spartan Nation is devastated. Talk about, the students selling their tickets, their student tickets to Michigan fans. A lot of people are upset regarding what's happened. They've lost 3 straight for the first time since early 2009. The offense took a dive after what we all thought was a great opening possession versus BYU. And so now we have to question Mark D'Antonio in his decision to promote Tyler O'Connor to be the starter because most people thought that this was going to be a transition year. And when you bucked the trend, and did you really believe that Tyler O'Connor was going to be the guy? I'm very curious to think what went into the evaluation of Tyler O'Connor. But my stance is he deserved to be benched versus BYU just due to lack of production. I mean, after that first drive, they did relatively nothing. 11 plays after that first drive that went 15 plays in the first half. Nothing. He didn't, and his role in it was he couldn't make a decision. He is looking over his shoulder. He's lost confidence. It's obvious. And so looking at it, the decision probably to make him the starter was the wrong one. They should have went just, if it's going to be a transition year, go with LeWerk, go with somebody else, go with the Messiah, go with the youth movement and see what they can do because this is a total disaster. This isn't what's supposed to happen. You know, going forward, I don't think he should be benched. Now that you've made this decision, what you got to do and what would help this team the best is you could go either way. You could bench him and go with the youth movement now, but I think the best guy that's going to give you the best opportunity to win is Tyler O'Connor. But what you got to do is you got to instill him confidence. You got to tell him, listen, you're my guy, ride or die. Let him have the confidence. And I really believe the coaching is doing him more of a disservice than anything else. I could even argue that he could have even stayed in the game versus BYU. The O-line struggled to get, the run game going. Receivers dropped a lot of passes. The receivers weren't open, so that's what contributed to him holding on to the ball. What he needs to do is he needs to have a lot more confidence because you got to remember, he did drop and had a decent game versus Notre Dame. It's just that early on he had a lot of turnover problems. And so what you got to do is you got to get back to the fundamentals and you have to run the ball effectively. And unfortunately, the injuries on defense have just killed this team. But most people are not pointing to the players. They're really blaming the coaches. Dave Warner and the offensive staff has brought out an offense that has really devastated the fan base. It's boring. It's absolutely terrible to watch. Everybody's furious. So my opinion is ride out with Tyler O'Connor. If you're going to lose 6-7 games, he's the guy you go with. But I think early on, if you were going to make the decision to go young, they should have did it from Jump Street. Game one, the work or the Messiah have to be in there. But you've chose Tyler O'Connor to keep continuity or for whatever reason. Now that you've made that choice, stick with Tyler O'Connor. He should be the starter the rest of the way.
Look, this is a kid who went into Ohio State and beat what looked like a insurmountable task of beating Ohio State last year when he had an offensive line. This year, no offensive line. The play calling by the offensive coordinators is atrocious. This team is built to run the ball. That is how Michigan State has won games. Now you're putting Tyler O'Connor in a spot where he's got to drop back and throw the ball. It isn't going to work. And you're right. I think he has lost some confidence, and he has no confidence in that offensive line, nor should there be. So that being said, going into Saturday's game against Northwestern, who's going to start? Is it going to be Tyler O'Connor? Is it going to be Damian Terry? Or is it going to be Brian Lewerke, the freshman?
Oh man, that's the $1 million question. The talk is probably it might be Terry because he also has eligibility next year, so he might be the guy that carries the reins going forward. And they might want to see what he's able to do. But it's going to probably be either Terry. I would give him the edge at this point in time of this recording, and then Tyler O'Connor. I don't think they're going to go fully youth because it's easy for us to say throw in LeWerk, throw in Messiah, but they're not ready. They're young, inexperienced quarterbacks. And with what you're seeing, even versus a team like Northwestern, it's going to cause a problem. And I don't know why these coaches are so stubborn. The season's lost. Mark D'Antonio, comes out and still trying to rally the troops, saying that there's a lot of goals ahead. The season's done.
You got to keep it together.
It's terrible. This is absolutely terrible. And the fact is,
don't you guys have a bowl streak or something? I don't know. Michigan keeps silly stats like that. Don't you guys have one of those?
What we're looking at right now, the big talk is nepotism going to be the downfall of Mark D'Antonio because, sports is a nasty business. And if your program is looking to be elite, then Dave Warner's ass should be fired immediately. If you're going to play we're loyal, this is the reason why you're not like Alabama. Our goal was to go from Michigan State to Alabama, not to go from Michigan State to Indiana. So if you're looking along that line, it's Michigan State. You can say pump the brakes. He's done a great job. But now you've reached a certain point, the expectations change. So now the talk is starting, not a lot, but whether Mark D'Antonio is even worthy of keeping his job if he's going to not adjust the offense and not make changes because it's a major mistake to, go from a college football playoff team to this. It's a big mistake. And you can say, well, he gets a pass. They've done this before. He gets to kind of ride on his coattails of the success he's had. I don't believe that. I think he has a new goal. And when you make new goals in sports, if you fail to reach them, you move on. Mark D'Antonio's record at Michigan State is cemented forever. He's done a great job. But now the goal's changed. Now the goal is take the level of consistency and take it to the national level where you're like Alabama. With that, he's failed. So can anyone do it? Probably not. It's hard with Michigan, Ohio State, the region. It's hard to do that goal. That's super hard to execute it. I don't think anybody can even do it. But that's the goal now. And with that, he's failed royally.
I think you're being a little bit too hard. Just as an outsider looking, I think you're being a little bit too hard on Marky D there. Look at what he's done for you. He basically took you from a John L. Smith coach team that was just full of boobs and idiots to a team that was last year playing in the playoff and contending for a national championship. You're right. Sometimes regression sucks, and you got to take a step forward to take a step, take a step backwards to take a step forward. And I think that's kind of where the program is right now. So I understand what you're saying. I wouldn't be so quick to fire that guy. I think that's just inane to talk like that. All right, after what seemed like a breakout game against a very bad Rutgers team, should Jabrill Peppers be included in the early Heisman hype? He had a punt return for a touchdown that was called back. He had scored a couple touchdowns on offense, made a few plays on defense. I mean, the guy is seemingly everywhere on the field.
A lot of people are discussing this, whether there is merit to Jabrill Peppers being in the Heisman talk. I think the schedule hurts him because the opposition, and when you did play a real team in Wisconsin, the performance wasn't that great. He was nearly absent. So what he's got to do is, that's great. He's putting his name in the conversation. Is he one of the top 3 players in the country? You could argue 3 at best, but there's other players that are just ahead of him right now. What he's got to do to firmly cement his place in New York is do something special versus Michigan State and do it versus Ohio State. In the big stage, on the big primetime moment, and to help your team win, then I think he'll earn a spot. But right now, it's all hype, and he's benefiting from it greatly. The Michigan hype. You got people commenting on using highlight from a punt that didn't even count, because it's Michigan. And so he's going to benefit greatly, but I do agree with some that say if he's going to really, really cement the spot and get and earn votes, he probably should be the running back.
All right, moving on to the Pistons. Their season will be getting underway here very shortly. And Reggie Jackson is now sidelined for what looks to be about 6 weeks with some knee tendonitis. So how much of a difference or drop-off will the Pistons see with Ish Smith running the point?
You're going to see a significant drop-off, and here's why. You've seen the performances early on. Ish Smith is a backup. That's his role. And what we're seeing is, how hard it is to play the point guard position in the NBA. I'm not saying Ish Smith's a bust, but there's a big difference from playing with the 76ers and then coming in and trying to run Stan Van Gundy's system. So what you're going to see early on is a huge transitional period because Stan Van Gundy's already gotten in Ish's face and said, listen, your job's not to just pass the ball all around the court. You got to be aggressive. You got to show tenacity. You got to score the basketball. Early on, there's a different pace that Reggie Jackson and Ish Smith run. And so it's going to take the team time to adjust to how Ish Smith plays the point guard position. It's a devastating loss. Reggie Jackson did some things, and we were talking about the transition that he needed in order to become a primetime player and lead this team. Ish Smith, I believe, with a full season under his belt, running the system, can be a serviceable point guard. But in the meantime, you got to look to improve. He's a certain level. It's just hard for a sub 6 foot guy to run at the point guard spot in this day and age. The tough part, also with basketball, like anything else, fundamentally, if you're going to take a shot, you got to make it. Unfortunately, Ish right now, his the consistency in his shot isn't there, and it's being looked at, and he's got a lot of pressure early on. Can he adjust over the course of time? Of course. If he's the point guard the entire way, and Reggie Jackson has a setback, you're going to look at this team having the same problems and not even making the postseason. You need to upgrade.
So you think it's going to be tough sledding for the first couple weeks of the Pistons season. Expect that to be a little bit of a rough go, especially with Ish Smith sitting there controlling the point. Like you said, I think if he had more experience with Stan Van Gundy's offense, it wouldn't be that tough of a transition, but it's a new season. It's his first year. I think you're right. It's going to be a little bit of a dire situation for everything to kind of get going there. All right, well, that's all I got for you for Docs in Session. Another great job by you. Again, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And every time we do this, you beat the man.
Give me the podcast Universal Championship. I'll take it and wear it proudly. I'll defend it on any brand, no doubt about it. Great questions. I just wish that, being a Sparty fan, I'm going to ask you this. Is Michigan going to whoop Michigan State's ass October 29th?
You know what? I've been at odds about this because no matter what, Michigan State always gets up for that one game. It doesn't matter how bad or how awful their season is. They get up for that one game, and they could be the team that sits there and could cause a huge blemish for the Wolverines. I think it's going to be a little bit of a tough go for the Wolverines. I don't think they're going to be embarrassed, but I think Michigan's going to win.
Talk about shifting the tide. That probably could be a very sentinel game if Michigan comes to East Lansing and drops 60 on Michigan State and really dominates. You could be looking at a massive recruiting shift and a continuation of the dominance that Michigan is looking to accomplish. Well, very interesting. Good stuff, sir. Let's take our final timeout. Come back, finish up episode 166, and try to figure out what the hell's going on with the team in Detroit that plays hockey. Doc and Jock, episode 166, Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Doc and Jock here for Fanatic U. If you're looking for some sweet sports swag and you love your Detroit teams, and I mean you really love your Detroit teams, you got to check out fanaticu.com and get the coolest gear out there and rock your Red Wing shirt, rock your Lions shirt, rock your Piston apparel. Wear it till the wheels fall off. Michigan State, you know what? They got it too. Check out Fanatic U. They have 6 locations all over Metro Detroit. Check them out, fanaticu.com.
Yeah, we coming now. Come on. Yeah, that's right. We put it down. It's like a family in here, just a little disabled. Putting it down, we lay them out on the table. Yeah. Who's in the house? The brothers in the house. Gotta turn it on out. Let you know what we about. Kinda like Cain and Abel. A bit unstable. Don't be breaking the brain. Break the whole damn table.
And welcome back from that awesome break. All right, Red Wing season's about to get underway here. They are in Tampa Bay this evening to sit there and kick off their season. After a couple questionable moves and a couple questionable decisions by Ken Holland and the front office of the Wings, sitting there releasing a few players, and we'll kind of talk on that and we'll touch on that a little bit later on. I got a question for you, Doc. With all that's been going on around the Detroit area, it's been kind of bleak lately. It has been very good. Which Detroit sports team seems to be more in a rebuild mode around here? And which general manager do you have the least faith in? Is it Ken Holland with the aging Wings, who are just basically playing for a win streak? Is it Al Avila with the sluggish Tigers, who, again, fell 2 games short of making the playoffs? Or is it Bob Quinn with the helpless Lions dealing with a guy like Jim Caldwell? We put a poll out there on the Detroit Sports Podcast Twitter account, so you can follow that at Detroit Podcast. Early returns on that, and we'll update this before the segment's over here. Ken Holland's taking the lead with 43%, followed by Al Avila and then Bob Quinn. It looks like Bob Quinn gets a little bit of a free pass because it's his very first season here in Detroit. What's your take here? Because what the Twitter poll shows, I totally agree with. I have no idea what Ken Holland's doing. He was able to make a Jedi mind trick and sit there and move Pavel Datsuk's contract. We all thought, we're like, whoa, this is great, outstanding. They just basically flip-flopped first-round draft picks, takes this money into the offseason, and goes and signs Steve Ott, who, out of all the guys he picked up, that's the one I have the least amount of issues with because he's a fourth-line grinder, and it's not that big of a deal. Picks up the corpse of Thomas Vanek, who I'm not expecting much of. He's 3 or 4 years past his prime, and then he goes out there and picks up a guy to try to replace Pavel Datsuk. A two-way forward, if you will, in Franz Nielsen, who I'm not necessarily high on. When looking at the free agent market, there were other players who I thought filled a better need. And again, it just looks like more old guys sitting there taking the roster spots of young guys on this team. And I just have no idea where we're going as a Detroit Red Wing fan, as somebody who wants the Wings to sit there and do well. I'm overplaying for a streak. I don't need to do that. If you're going to tell me that we're going to lose and we're going to struggle for the season, I'd much rather do that with young guys than with these older players. It just doesn't make any sense for me.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we talked about it in earlier podcasts that we're basically in purgatory with the entire Detroit with all the teams in the Detroit sports scene, in that none of them really are anywhere near title contention. So it's kind of tough knowing that it's tough to get up week in and week out, knowing that the teams that we support and love aren't anywhere near world titles. And so we got to look to basically college teams to look for top-end success. But now you ask, okay, which general manager do I have the least confidence in? Kenny Holland does earn some respect in that he's put together teams in the past that have won Stanley Cups. He's put together that streak, unfortunately, going forward, and I agree with you, is a hindrance. But, hey, it could be worse if you're trying to rebuild and not making the postseason. So Kenny Holland is second, in my opinion, in the poll, in that I don't have a lot of faith in what he's doing going forward. But the general manager who I have the least amount of faith in right now is Al Avila. And the reason why is because you have an opportunity to correct the ship. You were part of the hiring of Brad Ausmus, and you were there, and you've seen kind of how he's progressed. To not make a move after 3 failed seasons, not just 1 failed season, not just 2, 3 failed seasons, you continue to roll with this guy. What are you seeing? And then you've seen some of his moves, and he's also given out contracts with long-term deals to guys that really aren't going to deserve it and you're going to consider to be busts. And it's still going to be, up in the air to see what Jordan Zimmerman does, because that's a big-time problem if he doesn't give you any sort of return. He gave you a little bit of a return this year in the first half of the year, but unfortunately, you got to look at his first year in Detroit, Jordan Zimmerman, that is, as being a disaster. And so Al Avila doesn't give me a whole heck of a lot of confidence right now, because your decision to retain Brad Ausmus is really bad, in my opinion. You could go out there and improve the team dramatically by changing who's running the club day to day and who he's brought in for the bullpen. He tried to make moves. Unfortunately, when you look at it, the bullpen sucks. It still sucks. And so do I have confidence he's going to go out there and target the right people and give them the right value deals? No. Do I have confidence that he's going to accurately assess what's going on in the clubhouse? No. And then to, even if you were in good standing with Brad Ausmus, to come out and say that it was a mistake to hire him 3 years ago is technically a big faux pas. You can't do that. You basically have told everybody that, well, it was probably stupid to hire a rookie manager when everybody already knew that. So that really should not have been said. And in essence, if you're going to give Brad Ausmus a 1-year deal, you've basically titled him a lame duck. So that's a problem, in that if you're going to go all in, stick your nuts on the table and give him a 2 or 3 year deal, tie yourself to him. And why the lame duck status is real. The players can probably sense that, well, if it's not good, halfway through the year, they know Brad's gone. So you can't do that as a general manager. That's a rookie mistake. So that's why, in my opinion, Al Avila is the guy that I don't have confidence in at all.
So safe to say that Mr. I has 2 of probably the worst GMs in the Metro Detroit area. That being said, Ken Holland just compounded what he was doing by essentially letting guys just go. He ended up waiving a glut of players on this team, including a guy like Martin Firk, who got picked up by Carolina for nothing, and a guy like Timo Pulkkinen, who seemed to be a fan favorite, had a real heavy shot, could seem to snipe it from just about anywhere on the ice. He just couldn't play defense well enough for this team.
And speed was lacking, according to other NHL players.
Well, that's a possibility too. They were just waived, allowed to just kind of hit the trail, just let the door hit you where the good Lord split you there. To me, this is a huge, huge mistake by Ken Holland.
Really?
You have this glut of players, and you're just going to let them walk out the door. Look, Martin Firk was a highly rated draft pick, and I understand that he wasn't able to transition and be the player that you wanted him to be in the NHL. That being said, another team like Carolina sure had a taking to him, and they hurried up and swooped him up. Same thing with Timo Pulkkinen, hurried up and swooped him up too. You could have sat there and possibly packaged these guys and ended up getting a 7th-round draft pick, a 6th-round draft pick, something. You just don't let guys walk out the door for nothing, and that's what Ken Holland did. And that again, he was able to sit there and pull off a great trade on draft day, and then turns around and compounds his misfortune of free agent signings by just letting guys walk out the door. It just frustrates me and makes me think, what is he doing? I just don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, I can make sense of it because I can kind of see what they're doing. They're trying to find the perfect blend of veteran leadership with youth. And so they've seen
You already have one of the oldest teams in the NHL.
But you obviously know they're not going full-on youth movement. We want that. I'm not saying, remember, put yourself in their shoes. You have to observe the trends of what you're seeing. And so you're seeing guys like Steve Ott, older veteran. Franz Nielsen, older veteran. So the organization is just a little bit gun shy of just saying we're going to roll out a team of Pulkkinen and guys all under 30. They just won't do it. Whether that's right or wrong, that's just what they're doing. Is that we heard on Tuesday they sent Mantha down. We're all like, what's going on? They don't feel like he's ready. He's NHL ready. And so the Red Wings might have a standard that's unrealistic for young players. And whether you agree with that or not, this is what they're doing in order to keep a competitive team because, yeah, I agree with you. Probably the biggest reason is that playoff streak because they also have to put asses in the seats. And if you have a shitty team going into a new stadium, you have to have that balance of like at least being competitive. And they feel like with more veterans, it's a little bit easier to go forward. So they're trying to find that right mix. My contention with Ken Holland is the youthful guys that he's tapped to bring in here aren't the right guys. You know, Nyquist, Tatar, Pulkkinen, they're all kind of the same guy. And so you go, well, we thought that they could do some things and judging them by NHL standards and the Red Wing standards, I'm okay with them releasing Pulkkinen. I'm okay with that because if AA can come in and provide you speed and goals, that's fine. If Mantha can do that in his progression, that's fine. You brought in Franz Nielsen to do some things. You're hoping Vanek can rehash something from his past. You got to also remember, they believe that Dylan Larkin's the next superstar, so they're going to count more on him. And then you go, okay, if you get progression and results from him, that top line looks decent. I like the formation of line one. If you can address the defense and you can address goaltending and you get improvements from Mrazek and Howard, team looks a lot better. I have a little bit more hope. I'm thinking that the lack of confidence and the really anger and frustration about Pulkkinen, he wasn't that good. He was okay, but he didn't produce enough at the NHL level.
While I agree with you, I wasn't really upset that they let him go. It was the fact that they got nothing. They basically let something for nothing go.
But their philosophy is not to really. If they draft a 7th round dude, they don't really need that anyway.
But you can sit there and you can package those picks and move up or down the draft board. That's my thought process. If you get something,
they could get better at that for sure.
If you get something in return, you can then try to spin that for something else. Just like what I'm going to try to do with you for fantasy football. I'm going to try to give you something, and I'm going to try to spin it for something in return that will help benefit me as well as benefit you. It's just the way it kind of works. And you said it yourself. They let a guy like Anthony Mantha, they sent him back down to Grand Rapids. A guy like Mitch Callahan, a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi. I don't know if you took in any preseason hockey or you watched any of it, but all of these guys did some pretty awesome things out there, and it looks like the future's bright. But how bright is that future if you never get to it? It always seems like they're just putting these guys on the back burner. I don't understand it. You're going to sit there and you're going to re-up with a guy like Darren Helm. And look, I like Darren Helm. I think he brings an asset to this team that is beneficial. But not at $4 million a season. $3.85 million a season for 5 years, that's a hefty investment to make with a guy. When you've got a guy like a Tyler Bertuzzi and Anthony Mantha and Mitch Callahan sitting there just biding time, waiting to come up. Why would you send these guys back down to Grand Rapids if you're never going to play them? What's the point? If you're going to do anything, trade them and get something in here to make a difference. Because right now, the way this team is set up, the playoffs is going to be a struggle.
And here's the problem, though. What this team needs defensemen, right? That's probably the area of need biggest, okay? But that's what everybody needs. If you're going to offer Pulkkinen and all these guys that are minor league talent, you're not going to get a defenseman. Other teams have guys that they want. And so you've seen the discussion about Trouba, right?
Yes.
Okay, so everybody's coming. They're not going, I'm going to trade you, a second-line defenseman for Pulkkinen. They're not going to do that. They're going to go, we're going to not give you even a 7th round. The value, I believe, right now for Pulkkinen is 12th round, 13th round, end of the draft type talent.
So nobody, nothing.
So nothing. You get nothing.
Just undrafted free agent.
And here's,
and that's fine.
Right.
But my thought process was you could take those spare parts, though. You take enough spare parts that a team maybe has some interest in, you can usually get something in return. Even if it's a conditional draft pick 2 years down the road, you can still get something in return.
See, watching wrestling has given me a good analogy. Guys like Pulkkinen, Tatar, Nyquist, they're a bunch of mid-level guys like Heath Slater. You're not going to...
Hey, I like Heath Slater.
Dude,
He's got kids, bro.
That guy's going to be buried in the mid-card forever.
He's awesome, though. Dude, he's got a great bit going on, and the fans love it.
The problem is, though, the Red Wings have a bunch of mid-card talent. They got 1 or 2 Triple H's. They got 1 or 2 superstars, and they need more. So that's why people are clamoring for more names, is that you need more talent on this team, but it's hard. And what their job is going to be is to look through the minor league system and draft better guys. I think the draft class that we all thought was going to be so awesome isn't that good. And you have to really, really take note of that. They're only a certain level. They're mid-card guys. Larkin, Triple H status, superstar in waiting. The rest of the guys behind him, you're looking to really try to get more out of them than what they probably can produce. I don't know if Nyquist, Tatar, Double A are going to even put the puck in the net consistently. That's been the problem.
But here's the thing, all right? If you have a superstar, you still need to surround him with some talent. You got to put some guys around him that are capable. And look, Anthony Mantha was up here for 10 games and had 3 points in 10 games. For his first go-round in the NHL, that's pretty solid. Tyler Bertuzzi looks like he's going to be a real solid player. Give these guys a chance. Let them do something. Instead, you've got the corpse of Thomas Vanek out there skating around. Look, Thomas Vanek's not going to put 40 goals in the net. He just isn't. It's not where he's at anymore in his career. It's been a downward slide for the last 3 seasons with this guy. That's why nobody else wanted him. And yet you take a 1-year flyer on the guy. And look, Steve Ott, I like Steve Ott. I think Steve Ott plays a good game. I think he has some leadership that he brings to the clubhouse here. But that being said, you could kind of do without Steve Ott. You don't necessarily need him. Out of everybody that they signed, he was the one guy I was most okay with because of the price and because of the role he's going to play on this team. You're not biting a whole lot of time from some of these younger cats. And I just don't understand why you go out, you re-up Darren Helm for such a long time. You just kind of keep recycling the same parts. It's just like you need to inject some new life into this team. You got new life waiting, literally waiting in the wings. That's what they always tell us, waiting in the wings. And yet you don't want to sit there and you don't want to give them the push. You don't want them to sit there and get out there. It's like, here, you want to use wrestling analogies, right? You want to. Let's do this, all right? So let's go back, I don't know, I'll take you back, 15 years, 16 years? You got a young cat named John Cena. He comes out, his whole gimmick's like this cyborg thing. It's atrocious. It's what he's doing in OVW, and it's not good at all, right? Ends up scrapping it, and he becomes this white rapper. And for some reason or another, it clicks. The fans love it. Everybody loves it. Vince McMahon doesn't give him the push. Never gives him the push. If he never gives him the push, you don't have a 15-time WWE World Heavyweight Champion. You don't have that guy. You don't have one of the biggest selling guys in all of WWE history. You don't have the guy who makes a ton of Make-A-Wish Foundation wishes come true. You don't have the face of WWE, because I don't care who you say the face is, it's John Cena.
See, where your analogy is flawed is that you think these guys with proper talent and continuation, they can become the John Cena.
I don't necessarily.
I think they're all cyborgs. They're all the cyborgs.
I don't need them to be John Cena. I just need them to get the push. Get the push and see what they can do. You don't even know what they can do yet.
I don't think that you need to see them on the ice too. I think what the management thinks is you don't need to see them on the ice. They already know. And the problem is, though, you might be.
So why are you holding on to Anthony Mantha then? If you know what he is, okay, if you know that he's not going to sit there and he's not going to exceed expectations, why not trade him away? Why not package Anthony Mantha and Timu Polkkinen and then go get your Jacob Trouba?
The problem is, though,
because there were talks that they wanted Anthony Mantha.
The problem is, though, you revealed your hand on some level when management last year came out and said Mantha needs work. See, unfortunately, you crushed his value.
Okay,
he needs work.
Okay.
Everyone can see it.
Well, then that is an issue with Ken Holland.
Yes.
And that is another reason why he is the worst general manager right now in the city of Detroit.
Right. I think he is what I think at the level where he needs to make better picks is at the draft. I think evaluating talent. Have you seen any player that you can tangibly remember that's left the Wings and it just lit up the NHL? Not really. There's guys that have scored points, but I think the issue is the talent that they want to see progress isn't progressing, but they're at fault too for bringing them along as well. So that's the problem, is that at the draft level in the past 5 years where it's more important, because in the past he could just buy talent and make trades. Now when you're forced to look at cap space and giving contracts, in another area that he's struggling tremendously, he's giving long-term deals to guys that don't deserve it. The value that you're getting from Abdelkader, Helm, and Miller, and all these guys, the deals are not they're not in line with what their talent deserves. And so when you do that, this is where you have problems in mismanaging the club and the cap. So 2 areas I'd say tremendously they can get better at: managing the cap and getting value for the players that they're signing, and picking better players in the draft.
I agree. All right, I think their draft needs to improve, and I think the way some of these contracts that Ken Holland has doled out, they're brutal.
Unfortunately,
there's no other way to say it. They're absolutely
But
brutal.
you're absolutely right. Sometimes you make a pick, and sometimes you got to roll with it. Anthony Mantha, just play him and let him get exposed. Well, nothing worth. What are you gonna do?
Well, if that's how you feel about it, why don't you trade him?
Everyone knows that.
Nobody
Everyone knows
has value. He still has value. You're right. It might not be all the way up here at the very, very tippy top, but he still has value. There are teams that will take him. There's a ton of teams that'll take him. A team like Minnesota would pick him up in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Honestly, the Penguins would take him. There are other teams that will contend for a Stanley Cup that would love to have a guy like this. You're right. He's not a great two-way player. That being said, there's a lot of guys in the league who aren't great two-way players. But you know what? They make up for it because they can score goals, and they can help create some offense for your team. If you're not going to sit there and you're not going to play responsibly defensively, you better do one or two things for me. One, you better score goals, or two, you better be a threat offensively for me. That's the only reason I can sit there and I can roll you out on the ice.
All right, so next week we'll get into the line matchups. We'll look at the first week and see how they do. I'm very curious.
Do you see them making the playoffs before we go?
Do I see them making the playoffs? This is a tough question because I know that this 25-year playoff streak is very important. When I look sitting today at what the others in the East have done, they look like they've gotten tremendously better, and the Red Wings have only gotten incrementally better. I would say that this year, more importantly than any other year, if Peter Mrazek makes the biggest improvement and he can do some things to carry you, you'll get in. But that's the one guy that has to step up and lead your team. If he doesn't get into, let's say, the top 7 in goals against average and save percentage, no way. That defense is probably going to have some issues, and with injuries and stuff like that. So I'm going to say this. They're going to make the postseason because I do believe Mrazek has that talent and that competitive spirit. He will get better. He will be the guy that we're talking about at the end of the season. But the biggest thing, though, in terms of what their ceiling is, probably one round in the postseason. And again, I see them probably losing in the first round, maybe second if they get lucky and win a series. But this year is going to be a struggle all the way. We're going to be talking like we did last year about, ooh, boy, because if it takes 95 to 98 points to get into the postseason, every game's going to be important. And I'm going to go, yes, they're going to be in the postseason, but early exit.
I think it's going to come down to the very last day, just like it did last year. It's going to be a coin flip on whether or not they make it. It'll be some team who's struggling just as much as them. And to give you a quick update on the DSP poll, again, you can check that out at Detroit Podcast. Which GM do you have the least confidence in? Ken Holland holding a commanding lead at 43%, followed by Al Avila at 35%, Bob Quinn 18%, and for some reason Stan Van Gundy's on this list, pulling in 4%. I don't know why, but it's what it is. Ken Holland is absolutely atrocious right now.
Man, it's going to be a fun watch. And, of course, who do they open the season with tonight?
That's right.
Tampa Bay on the road, right?
Our boy Stevie Y squad.
Monday home opener last season for the Joe. Let's make it a good one. Have a little hope. Maybe they'll turn it around. Maybe this is the right blend. Maybe Peter Mrazek emerges as a superstar. And or maybe if something happens to Mrazek, Jimmy Howard can finally turn it around. Or you finally nut up and make a bold move and trade Howard. You know, trade Howard and Mantha and see what you can get. Maybe a defenseman or something of need. So maybe you might need an injury from a club that is in some peril.
I don't know. We'll see what's going on. I don't like the free agent signings that Ken Holland made. I don't like some of the things he's done by just waiving players where I feel like there's some value that you could get for them. And then just his usage of cap space has been absolutely brutal. Do you realize that you're going to be having 3 goaltenders on the bench because you need to maximize your cap space?
Yeah.
Because you screwed that up.
Yeah, of course.
Again, you sat there, you freed up $7.5 million with Pavel Datsyuk going away, and yet you still botched it. Good job, Kenny.
Let's see what happens. Episode 166, a good one. I'm enjoying watching the wrestling in the background. A little bit of NFL talk, good stuff. Let's see the Lions do some things, and let's see where the Tigers address the offseason and what they target first. Looking forward to future editions of the podcast. Thanks to everybody that's been downloading across the various platforms. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you for the interaction on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. For the Jock, Adam Strozinski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. You've been listening to Doc and Jock.
Go Wings.
Second dick.
This was locker room talk.
Sorry, Detroit. Didn't quite work out.
And all I can say is Detroit Sports Podcast scores.
I hear voices in my head, they counsel me, they understand, they talk to me. show me things are too easy.